It's lovely. Thank you, ladies, for coming. I'm always a little bit surprised that people show up for this, but thanks for being here. If just to warn you, I am recording it and I'm going to put it on my YouTube channel. So, if there's anything you want to say or not have recorded, let me know so I can pause it. Um, but the recording will not show your names or anything. It's just gonna be your voices. So I'll try not to use names, or at least not real names, too much. Um, this one's gonna be an Ask Me Anything, so you don't have to. If you have questions about the books, I'm gonna give you time to ask questions about the books. If you have questions about anything else, I'm open. I really don't mind. This is completely informal. If you haven't been here before, this is really just a time to say hi and spend some time together and talk about stuff that we like. So, whatever comes up, and we'll just follow the rabbit trails where they lead. I do have a couple questions from some people that couldn't be here. Did anybody who's here now have any questions that were not related to the books? Was there anything that you guys were wanting to ask that wasn't related to the stories? Okay, cool. So, what I've got is I've got a few questions in front of me, and there's a couple here that I get in comments sometimes, so I wanted to answer those. And then we can just spitball after that, whatever comes up, whatever interests you guys. If you have questions that are about a specific book, just jump in. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be the same as what we're talking about. But yeah, if there's a bunch of questions about one book, we'll finish those before we start another. Um, the
Amy, this is Swaranti. I have a question.
Hey,
Hey, so you said you are working on another book in the King of Beasts world, right?
mm-hmm.
So can you use an hint or an idea on what it is about, or is it about? If
Okay.
you can't answer, it's okay. Totally
The
fine.
I'll
Just
tell you
curious, that's all.
this. You're going to see an announcement for the next book in September.
Okay.
I don't know exactly when it's going to start,
Okay.
because it depends on how Queen does in Sparity. So, what's going on right now behind the scenes is that the Sparity Awards, basically, what they do is they spend the first 6 months just letting the books do their thing to see which books are kind of doing okay. August and September are the 2 months that they're watching closely to see how books are earning and how readers are engaging with them. So the two major markers for Sparity are the amount of income that it makes, and how readers vote and comment. So in August and September, they're watching Queen, among other things. And at the end of September, early October, they pick what I'm calling finalists. I don't know if they call them that, but what they basically say is at the end of that time, they're going to narrow down the field and they're going to have like a pool of books that they are kind of trying to decide who's going to win awards and who's not. Because the awards are
Okay.
both financial and features and possible adaptations and stuff like that. So
Okay.
in October and November, if Queen is in that pool, then I have to kind of be ready to potentially have the audience grow quite a bit. Because what they do is they give them features and they do stuff with the books to kind of see what rises to the top.
Okay.
And right now, Queen is running for income. Queen is running fifth in Sparity in the romance side, in the female lead. That might not stick. It might drop. It also might increase. I don't know. But for right now, it's definitely high enough. It's performing well enough that at least for now, it's still a contender. So, um, until I know what's going on with that, I can't make any hard and fast plans for the next book because what I don't want is for the next book to get buried and not updated regularly because there's too many commitments. The other thing that's happened is that King of Beasts is taking longer to finish than I thought it would. We're going to hit the end of volume 2 at the end of August. And I thought I thought it would be virtually done by then. But it's not. And so there's going to be a volume 3. And I'm not sure yet how long volume 3 is going to take. So while I have 2 books already on double daily updates, I can't really add a third. I tried it twice, and both times it basically killed me. So what I'm going to do in September, I'm going to announce what the next book will be. And then, hopefully not too long after that, I'll be able to announce when it's releasing. But there's another plan that I have that I've decided to talk about because I'd love to hear what you guys think about it. I have, I think I talked maybe even in the last author chat. I have an idea for a secondary world of Anima. And by that I mean another region within the world that is not aware of Reth's Wildwood or anything like that. A completely separate community or country or whatever you want to call it. The way my contracts for web novel work, I can't write anything in this world without giving it to Web Novel, or at least giving them the option to contract it. If they turn it down, I can do whatever I want with it, but they won't, because Beast is doing well enough that if I add any books to the series, they will want it. So what I'm considering doing, because I'm having a lot of readers who are struggling with the privilege system, struggling to understand the complication of it, but also just engaging with, they don't want to engage with that system, but they want to read the book. One thing that some of the authors on Web Novel do is they set up Patreon where readers can just pay a monthly fee to read the book. So you don't have to unlock chapters and you don't have to blah, blah, blah. You can just choose your tier and you say, I want this many chapters a month, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm considering setting that up for next year and trying a book on there to see how it does. Because the income would not have to be as high on Patreon for me to maintain the same income level. So I'm sort of toying with that idea, but I know that there is resistance for some people in being on more than one platform for this. So that's not a plan, it's an idea right now, but it's something that I've...
Hey, Amy?
Yeah?
I'm sorry to interrupt. You cut out. I don't know if you cut out for everyone else or just me, but I missed what you said about you were doing Patreon for readers could pay a month to read, and then I didn't catch what you said after that.
So what I was saying was that some people don't want to engage the way Web Novel structures books. So I'm toying with the idea of doing a book on Patreon and seeing how or whether readers will come over to a different platform. Because I know other romance authors have tried it and only a few have had any success with it. It seems like romance readers are very, very different to the male lead side of Web Novel. They're very different audiences, very different demographics. They behave differently. They pay differently. It's just weird. And so I don't want to try and split people off, and I don't want to try and create complication for people. My goal, if I do something like that, is to make it simpler, not more difficult. But again, that means I kind of have to try something to see if it works, to see if people want it. So anyway, that's on the radar, but it's not a definitive plan yet. I just want you guys to maybe give it some thought and see how you go this year with reading books on Web Novel. If I do that, what I will likely do is a very similar world to Anima, but with a different cast of characters. and a slightly different lore, because I'm not allowed to take these characters and this world into a different platform unless they give me permission. So, yeah. So, long answer first for Vanthy's question is you'll know what book is coming out next in September. You should know in October at the latest. It either will start in October, or you'll know when it's going to start, because by then I'll know. And the only reason I'm not telling you is because I have 2 or 3 options, and if I told you, it would essentially be a spoiler for the book. So, so I'm not going to put it out there. But it's only, you'll know, I'm guessing, like a month from now. You'll know.
Okay.
I'll be announcing it. And
Okay.
if you're here in the
Thank you.
Discord, you'll know sooner. I'll let you guys know before I announce it on Web Novel. But I just need to get the story to a certain place before I do that. Or one of the stories
Okay.
I need to get to a certain place.
Okay.
all.
And do you know when you might start back on Prince?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Do you know when you might start back on Prince?
So I have scheduled what's happened in August. I am actually in the process of catching the other two's schedules up. And so, but I also have a week at the end of August that I can't work. We're going on vacation, and we haven't done that in 2 years. And so my goal was to not have to work at all during that time, which means that even though I'm doing better with the writing, it's crammed into a shorter period of time. So far, I haven't been able to write any Prince material, but I have a handful of days this month that I've set aside with the intention of writing on it. The only way that won't happen is if something else goes wrong in my private life and stops me from hitting the goals with the other books. Right now, I'm on track. So if my schedule works out, you will see probably like a handful of chapters on Prince this month, and then something a little bit more regular in September. But I'm just really hesitant to be like, oh, this is what I'm going to do, because I've already so many times. Oh, just a second, I couldn't hear you. Okay. Sorry, my son is sick. He does not have COVID, but he's sick, and he came in, and I thought maybe something was wrong. I'm really hesitant to make commitments about Prince now, because twice I have tried and twice I have failed, and so I don't want to be like, yeah, we're gonna do this, and then not do it again. So I will tell you that I do have it on the calendar, but I'm not gonna say it's gonna happen until I've actually done it. And then I've got stuff, and I can be like, hey, look, there's some material for you. I will tell you, I am not dropping that book. Like, that book, even if it takes time, that book is going to get written, because I love it, and I love those characters. And I have it plotted. Like, it really is just a matter of finding hours to do it. So.
Okay. Yes, we are still going to be here. So.
I appreciate
I'm happy
you guys.
about that.
Was there any other questions about general stuff? Cool.
You know, I have a question. What is the size of like the population of anima in like Wildwood that we know of?
So Wildwood itself, which is Reth's territory, has probably, I've never like pinpointed it, but I'm gonna say 800 or 900, maybe 1,000. If you count like the outskirts and stuff. But there are a couple of sort of tribes like the Bears and 1 or 2 more that I haven't brought in yet that would add to that. But because I haven't brought them in, I'm not gonna nail it down for you. So I'm working, in my mind, I'm working somewhere between 800 and 1,000. It's not big. So they're a small world, so to speak, or at least a small population, which is why the city's so contained, and that's why they can walk across it in a few minutes. You know, it's space-wise, I have it in mind as the town that I grew up in New Zealand was about a mile and a half by about a mile and a half. And you could walk across it in 15 or 20 minutes. And so I kind of, in my mind, I've used that sort of spatial thing, except obviously they're in a forest and it's trails and it's not straight lines and it's not a grid and all of that. But yeah, it's not very big.
Okay. And then I have a couple of questions actually. Then the outsiders, if
Mm-hmm.
two disformed mate, will their child be disformed?
Not necessarily. You're going to, if you're in the top tier of privilege, you're going to learn how and why the disformed came to be at the end of this month. So if you're
Okay.
not in the top tier of privilege, you'll learn next month, because those same
Okay.
chapters filter through. So you're still gonna get all of those answers, but you're not gonna get all the answers at once. So you'll start to see that at the end of the month, and you'll get the full picture next month, or as much of the full picture as I'm revealing in this book. So yeah, so disformation is a genetic thing in the sense that it's the way I explained it one other time, it's like human eyes and hair color and stuff like that. It's to do with genes and dominant genes versus recessive genes and stuff like that. So two people, for example, in the human world, two people with brown eyes can have a child with blue eyes if they both carry the blue-eyed recessive gene. It's rare, but it happens. And two people with blue eyes in the human sense, two people with blue eyes will always have blue-eyed children because there is the only gene they carry. Whereas with the anima, the disformation gene is a recessive gene, but anybody can carry it, but not everybody does. So even the disformed themselves can have offspring that are not disformed, but they do have a much greater likelihood of having disformed children if two of them mate, which is why in Queen you see so many more of them, because that has been happening more and more often as the outsiders have not split off, but as they've spent more time together, naturally people start forming relationships. So over time, that expanded, and so more and more disformed were born.
So, are they more fertile since their
Bit.
population?
They
Okay.
are a little bit. I'm not going to go any further than that because all
Okay.
this
I
stuff's
just
going to
wondered
come
if
up.
the population size and stuff in Queen. Okay. All right. I
Well,
won't
keep
ask
in
more
mind by the
questions
time
then.
you get to Queen, the population has increased. The overall population has increased, and
Mhm.
the disformed portion of the population has increased.
Yeah,
So,
that's why I was asking about King. I was trying to figure out how much. I was trying to figure out how much things are increasing.
so in King, the disformed population, I've never put it like a square number on it, but I'm thinking in my mind sort of 5 to 8%. They're a small number, and they seem even smaller because in some tribes and in some families, they kind of keep them out of the way and don't really talk about them. So a lot of anima that are not close to each other, they know when they're disformed if they come in contact with them because they can smell it, but they're not paying a lot of attention. Their focus really is on the quote unquote natural anima. So they don't really think about it. It's not really a prominent issue for them. Excuse me, for them. By the time you get to Queen, the disformed population has increased enough that they've become far more visible, even to anima that don't really want to think about it, which is why they're kind of creating some waves and stuff, because they're a much bigger portion of the population. They've gotten up to about 20% at that point, so 1 in 5, which is hard to ignore. So, because again, even though you have segregation, not even segregation, even though there's tribes and they are sort of aligned together, so they spend most of their time within their tribe, There's no sense of we can't mingle with those people. You know, they all come to the market together. They all go to the feasts together. They all use the same merchants, even though most of the merchants come from only one or two tribes. Like, there's not a sense of trying to keep other tribes away. It's just a purely kind of functional role that each tribe plays. So they end up spending a lot of their time together. But by the time you get to Queen, you have this large chunk of the population that is marginalized in the sense that many of the tribes won't use them for a lot of the major jobs and roles that the tribe plays. They have more free time on their hands. They're taking resources because in Anima, nobody starves. Nobody gets left without a roof over their head. Like, that just doesn't happen. You can be in a bad situation. You can be shunned, and that means that socially you'll be held apart. But in terms of your basic physical needs, they'll always be met. So part of the conflict that you see at the beginning of Queen is that these disformed are starting to become like a burden on some of the tribes. That's how the tribes are seeing it, because they can't play the role that the Anima want them to play, and yet there's a lot of them. So they're being seen as, in some of the tribes, not all of them, they're being seen as a drain on resources. So they are becoming far more prominent in their visibility to the rest of the Anima, and that's why it's creating issues in some of the tribes. So I had a couple questions that I keep getting in comments, a couple questions that came up from readers who weren't sure they were going to be here, and I wanted to answer those. One of those is a more generic question, and the other one goes into the crossover between king and queen. So anyway, the generic question, and I've had this more than once, and this is about me as an author. They say, why are your leading men man whores? They've all been guys who sleep around, and why have all the main female roles been virgins? So the first thing I want to say is, if you've read all my books, that's not true in all of them, but you're right, it's a prominent theme. So it is in the Anima world books, in the Beast books, it's there, and it's also in CEO, which is or Dangerous, which is my second biggest book. The other books don't have that. But oh, actually, no, one of them does. You're right. No, one of them does. But the reason, and I always give the same answer, but if you guys have questions about this, I'm happy to explain more deeply, because normally I'm only explaining this in a comment. This is essentially my life. So I grew up in a household of Christian faith, and I was taught not to have sex before I was married, and that was an ideal that I adopted young and held on to until my late teens. By the time I hit my late teens, early 20s, I had fluctuated on that idea, but not at that point met anybody that made me really tempted to go against it. So I didn't lose my virginity till I was 22, and I met my husband. Of course, he wasn't my husband when I met him. So this was my experience. My husband is 11 years older than me. He did not grow up in a household of faith. And he did not have any qualms. He was what I would call a serial monogamist. He'd had a lot of relationships, but only with one woman at a time. And he had a lot of experience, and I did not. And I was very, very blessed that God chose him for me, because even though he didn't grow up like I did, he took this stuff seriously. And in terms of how he related to me on this issue, he was very careful and very honorable towards me, and valued that I was still innocent, if you want to call it that, in that way. And I really value that. Like, now looking back as a woman, you know, I'm in the second half of my 40s. I have a teenage son, and I counsel women, and my start in life was very unique and different to a lot of, especially growing up in New Zealand, where there wasn't a lot of faith. It was very different to how very different to how all of my friends, in fact, grew up, and what they thought and how they acted. And you could ask them, if you talk to them now, they'll laugh with you, because I spent my entire high school fascinated with sex and constantly asking questions and getting them to explain how things worked to me and what they had and hadn't done and how this and that happened and everything. But what I value now, looking back, and what I wish more women, and especially young women, got the opportunity to experience, is how it feels when you have a man in your life that you're in love with, who values your, I don't even know what to say, because it wasn't an issue of purity. My husband was not a Christian when I met him. He didn't value this in me because he saw it as some sort of, moral thing. He just valued it. He just thought it was something special. And the way he treated me and the care that he showed for me in that process was really special. And the more I talk to women, and especially young women now, the more I realize how few women have had that kind of experience where they've been treated like they are special in their first sexual experience. And to this day, we've been together now. We've been married for almost 20 years. We've been having sex for 20 something, many. I think it was 1998, 1999. And he will still, to this day, "Are you okay?" Like, he'll still check in with me. And trust me, I'm okay. Like, there's nothing bad going on. But that's his attitude towards me, is to be protective and to be thoughtful and to value my experience. And too many women that I know don't have that. And I think that's a super valuable experience and a super special one. So partly you see this played out in my characters because it's what I know. The old writing adage is write what you know, because you can write it authentically. So it doesn't mean that you have to be an expert in it. It means something that you have had experience or crossed with so that you can emotionally represent it accurately. So from that perspective, it's natural for me to write this kind of interaction because that's what I experienced. But also intentionally with these books, with the Beast books, and with Dangerous, which is a far, far darker book. Far darker. If you haven't read it, check in with me before you do if you're a Beast fan. But my goal from the beginning, before there was even an audience for these stories, my goal was to give women a chance to see real love at work, what it looks like, how it feels. And yes, it's fiction, so it's romanticized. There's, these guys are pretty perfect in the way that they communicate things, and a lot of guys aren't good at that. There's no doubt that I've put rosy tinted glasses on a lot of stuff, but the guts of it, the love that happens between characters and the way that makes the woman feel, that's real for me, and I want to show that to people in stories where you have an opportunity to experience it in a way that's, you don't have to be defensive. You can just see it, hopefully. And also, in my years, I've seen, especially in counseling and stuff, women, that a lot of times we don't realize how our own actions are affecting our relationships, and we don't see how our choices are affecting our relationships. We only see it from our own perspective. And I have learned the hard way that for my marriage to be successful, I have to be willing at times to give up my ideals in order to make a union with somebody else who thinks very differently than I do. So the other side of this coin in these books is hopefully to show that it's not just the guy gives up everything and the girl is, coddled for the rest of her days. Hopefully, you're also seeing that there's a give and take and stuff like that, which gets a little bit off the topic, sorry. But so yeah, my guys are man whores. I jokingly use that term. I don't actually think it's a great term, but it makes me laugh, so I use it. my husband's not a man whore or wasn't a man whore, but he had a lot of experience, and that's just the term that I use to sort of fill that gap in. Um, but also within the animal world, you've got a culture that thinks about sex differently, so kind of lends itself to that. Um, did anybody have any questions about that stuff? Cool. Okay. I was gonna move into some questions and stuff from Queen and King. Did anybody come and have something they specifically wanted me to answer? Because I don't want to miss you guys who are here. I don't want to just sit here and read out questions and answer them for you. Do any of you have any questions about the books?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
It's a silly question, but I think practically. And I've been wondering, when the anima turn into their beast form, what happens with their clothes?
This keeps coming up. This keeps coming up. So, and I have to keep putting you off. I'm so sorry. All of this stuff, I never intended for the book to get as deep as it has before this got explained. Partly at the beginning, I hadn't worked out, at the very, very beginning of Beast, I hadn't worked out all of the intricacies of it. I just knew that the people went away and the beasts were there, and when the people came back, they were in the same state they were in when they left. So that was all I knew at the very beginning. Now I know how it works and why it works and everything like that. And all of this is going to get revealed. There's a bunch of stuff coming end of August and early September that's going to answer so many of these questions in King of Beasts. So you'll get the actual, like, the whole thing. I promise you will get that. But the thing that I will tell you this far is that the beast is a beast, and it is not them. So they are connected, and they share the experience, and when one is hurt, the other receives the wound, but they are not the same. When you see Reth in his lion form, it is Reth's beast. It is not Reth, if that makes sense. So that's as much as I can tell you now without spoiling what's coming. Sorry, but hopefully by the next time we do this, you'll have your answer for that.
I'll take it.
See, I picture like the Incredible Hulk, how he's like in his normal clothes, and then he turns into the Hulk, and like his clothes are all like ripped up and stuff, and then he goes back to being himself, and they're like in shreds.
No, you know what's really funny? I had to, for the paperbacks, I had to go back and do some editing of the early story, which I'm still in the process of doing. And I realized that in the first scene where Reth has to meet the Silent One, and he shifts very quickly and unexpectedly, it says that his clothing gets basically destroyed by this process. And that's the only place in the book that I've ever written it. I didn't actually remember that I had written that. And I've kind of figured out a mental gymnastics way to explain that now. But that's actually, here you have your author fail. This is the downside of writing a book before it's finished. Of letting people read a book, sorry, before it's finished. That's technically doesn't really work with the lore that I've created over the course of the whole story. So what you actually are seeing is that when the person, it says their back ripples because, or you see physical manifestations on the person because there's like a coming through of the beast, if that makes sense. And this is how I rationalized Reth's clothing getting torn off, that it was an uncommon experience because it says he had to shift so quickly. But what you're seeing is the beast coming through the person. But when they actually shift, who you are in contact with is the beast, which is why they have to learn to control it. And they talk about wrestling back control and basically why they don't, they're not as in control of their process and they're not thinking as clearly when they're in beast form, because the beast is sort of functioning independently of them, but they can hear each other and communicate sort of in a way where I imagine it, and audibly it would be the same as two people sitting next to each other in a room but not looking at each other. Everything I say, that person can hear, and everything they say, I can hear. But whoever is in the world at the time is the person who's in control. So the beast is in control in theory when it comes forward. But the anima has learned to control it and learned to make it submit so that they can come forward, because the true form of an anima is their human form, not their beast.
Question. This is Radhi. So, so the beasts, if they are in the beast form, they will still identify their mates, and
Are you saying, do they
if a
still
person,
identify?
yeah, do they still identify their mates? And
Yes. Yes. So one of the ways that the anima, I guess, or one of the things that you'll see every so often, you'll see in the book, a character will refer to how the beast form of the other character recognizes them. So Beren talks about it, or Reth talks about it with Beren, that his beast form recognizes Beren, his best friend. And you see a couple different scenes, one with Reth and one with Elia, where their beast form is conscious of the mate, or looking for the mate, and aware of them. And then you see that interaction when that first interaction when Reth first shifted in front of her when he was saving her from the wolves. Before he got there in his beast form, the driver to get back to the city was that he needed to be with his mate. So the beast form is aware of the most prominent relationships and will be more submissive to those. So where it's a mate, the beast form is protective of the mate and seeks the mate and wants to be around the mate. Like there's a connection. It's much more instinctive rather than rational. The beast is just aware, this is my mate, so they just want to be around him and want to be careful with him and be protective of them against other threats. But where anima have formed long-lasting relationships like Reth and Beren, where they have been close for a long time, their beast forms become accustomed and know the smell of this other anima that they're close to. So like there's one time when Reth and Beren were running from somewhere, I don't remember where it was, but they were both in beast form, and Reth's beast form thinks about the prey that's brother, because in beast form obviously a lion would see a horse as prey, but his beast form knows that's Beren, that's prey we don't eat. I think he actually says that at one point. The prey we don't hunt. So he recognizes the connection between the two and won't breach it. But they have to have a really solid and long-standing relationship for that to happen. Otherwise, they do recognize family. So if, for example, if Reth has offspring, his beast form will recognize the children as his cub and will take a parental role with them. So those really, really close connections the beasts will recognize, but they don't as a general rule. And when their instincts kick in, so this is one of the things that happens with young anima, they have to learn how to control their beasts while they're still young, because it's a lot easier to control, for example, a lion cub than it is to control a full-grown lion. So while children are young, their parents are teaching them how to control their beast while the beast is still young and fairly submissive, so that when it gets older and has a much stronger will, the anima has already developed that relationship with it. This is why Elia is struggling so much in Volume 2,
yeah,
because
that's what
she
I was
hasn't
gonna
had that
say.
process. She hasn't had that process. She has a fully adult beast that has not been taught or learned or developed the relationship to submit. So, and she doesn't know how to do it because she's not had any practice. So, hopefully there's nobody in here who's on volume 2 because that would be a big spoiler. But, yeah. Anyway, so yes, the beast is aware, but when their instincts kick in, if something is very, very threatening to them, or very, very frightening, they're just like any other animal, because I love animals. I've been around animals all my life, and I have seen this with animals where in these instinctive moments where they're not thinking, they're just reacting, they will attack unaware of who they're attacking, or they'll defend themselves unaware of who they're defending against. And once they realize who it is, they'll stop. But until they realize who it is, you know, this is how people end up getting bitten by their own dogs and stuff like that. Because the animal's instincts kick in and they react, and then they go, oh, whoops, and they stop. But by then it's too late. So the anima beasts do that as well.
Okay, so I have this image of like babies shifting into lions and biting their parents because they're having a tantrum.
So babies shift into cubs. So it's the way that I envision it is that babies shift into bitty bitty baby cubs, and as the child grows through sort of each phase of life, they're shifting into the beast that correlates with that. So I don't know if any of you guys have ever been to one of those places where they'll let you pet or be close to like lion cubs and stuff. I don't even want to get into the animal preservation side of that, but there's this whole theory that you can't do this with cubs that are older than 3 months, because once they get over 3 months old, they start becoming personally protective, and they will express their dissatisfaction with things in quite aggressive ways. And they're big enough at that point that they can do real damage, even though they're still very young by lion standards or big cat standards. So this is how I kind of envision this, is that the anima parents are, when they're babies and toddlers and little kids, are shifting. Yes, they will shift when they're emotional. So yes, you will get the 2-year-old that's throwing a fit and shifts into beast form. You're actually going to see this, I hope, later on. But anyway, so where there's a young child, they're shifting into a young beast. So even though the child's, say, 3, it's the equivalent of a cub, because a 2-year-old lion is roughly equivalent to like a 16, 18-year-old human. So in my mind, the beast grows at that slowed pace to match the human anima. And so at each point, by the time the beast gets big enough and strong enough to be a serious threat, the child has already grown enough and been trained enough to control them. And the parents are big enough and strong enough to control them as well. And then by the time they're adults themselves, they're under the control of the anima. So, you know, hopefully that person is taking care of and stopping them from attacking anything. But again, this is why Elia is having the trouble that she's having, because she has not been through this process. She's just dealing with a full-grown lion who's freaking out. I'm just trying to look through my list and see if I have any that kind of run into this. Oh, you know what? There was one question in here I did want to put, because I thought this was a really good question, and I think, and I've had this a couple times in comments, and I think it's confused people a little bit. In the early chapters of King of Beasts, Reth talks about that they had the right because he didn't find a mate. And now that the flames and smoke are coming up in Queen, people are making the correlation between the two. So there's a couple different questions that I have that I've been given around that. The first is that why was oh, let me get this right. Had not picked a mate. Described as fighting. So the flames and smoke that you see in Queen, it does match what you see with Reth and Elia, but here's the difference, or why it'll read a little bit differently. The flames and smoke in King of Beasts, you're seeing a lot through Elia's eyes, and she has zero understanding of this ceremony, like none. And on top of that, she's just been through an extremely traumatic experience, and she's weaker than everybody around her. So what ended up happening with Reth and Elia's ceremony was that Reth essentially carried her through it. So she had to get through the males to get to him. But she wasn't really fighting. They were more trying to seduce her because she was human and weak. They knew it wasn't a matter of, it wasn't like Elrith, who's like, come at me, bro. You know, she's like taking. Anyway, in case you haven't read it, I won't say anything, but Elia's experience of the ceremony is different, especially at the end. So the last part of the ceremony where the couple have gotten to each other, they've fought through the tribes and gotten to each other, then the tribe circles around them, there's like a dance and everybody's happy, but then they're supposed to fight their way out, and it's supposed to be a symbol of them in unity, being stronger together than they are apart. So we're going to get out of here together, fight together, and now we're free. When you see this with Reth and Elia, she's exhausted, she's traumatized, she's weak, she has no clue what's going on, and she's high. And so Reth Reth gets down on all fours and says, "Get on my back." And he like pummels his way out of there. And they're pretty easy on him, because usually this part of the ceremony is pretty much just about kind of making it look good. So there's one or two people that take a shot at Reth during that process, but most of the time he just pushes his way through. He gets out. It's no big deal. They're off by themselves. The difference with Elrith and Aaron is that there's no need for anybody to take anything easy, and then on top of that there's a lot of tension around her and their relationship and stuff like that. So Elrith's a fighter, and the Animen know this, and to show respect to a fighter, you fight. You know, you don't just let him win. So Elrith and Aaron's ceremony is a lot more aggressive at the end, and that's partly because Elrith is much more aggressive than Elia was, but it's also partly because of the tensions that are around them and their relationship going into that. But somebody had asked me why the smoke and flames are only done for the royal family, and why it was done for Reth. So first of all, they had confused. The rite of survival is the one that was only done for Reth because of his not mating. So the rite of survival doesn't have to happen unless the king, usually the dominant king, doesn't find a mate. It's the old ancient tradition. So it's happened throughout the centuries, but usually because the dominant hasn't met anybody that they're like, this is my guy or this is my gal. And so they call the rite of survival and basically turn it into a competition. It's happened less and less in modern history, but when Reth didn't mate for 10 years, the people basically put their foot down and said, you need to find a mate, and if you're not going to find it for yourself, then we're going to find you one, and they called the rite of survival because they're allowed to do that. So that was the rite that only happened because he hadn't mated. I'm sorry, I didn't write down who gave me this question, but I just wanted to clarify that because they had confused it, thinking that it was only flames and smoke that had happened. The flames and smoke will happen for any prominent true mate couple. So anybody can do the flames and smoke. You don't have to be in the royal family to have it. But a lot of couples won't bother. But it's a tradition in the prominent families, the royals, the cohorts, captains of the guard, the elders, like the people that are leaders in the society. Those are the ones that it is to this day, tradition that they walk the flames and smoke. Everybody else can do it, but they don't have to, and a lot of them won't bother. You only do it if you are true mates. It's not done just for normal. So there are some anima that choose each other as lifetime mates, but they're not true mates. They're choosing that, just like we would. But the ones that are true mates, where they believe that it's a soul connection and they were created for each other and they were always going to discover this relationship, those guys will always walk the flames and smoke unless there's something that prevents it from happening. Because the idea is that you are proving to the society that this isn't just, we didn't just decide this. Like this is who we are, and it's part of what we do. So traditionally, the royals always do it because it's one of those ancient things that's always been around, and it kind of brings the people together and brings the couple together in the people's eyes, which is why Elrith and Aaron are eager to do it, and why the elders basically insist that they do it. They already wanted to anyway, but it's to have that, again, that sort of tradition, or bring the old traditions to bear, so that the people can see that even though her rule is so different to what they're used to, she's not just sort of discarding everything. So the flames and smoke is not just for royals, but because we haven't had yet any of the major characters that are alongside the royals establish that true mate, there hasn't been an opportunity for me to show them at somebody else's ceremony, but it does happen. Oh, we never hear about anybody else's ceremony. That's just a failing of me. You do hear about it in that, like, Beren talks about his to Reth. Like, I think he mentions his own, and there's a couple of different times, but these have all happened in the past. So they're not happening, you're not seeing them happen, but they do refer to them. They do talk about them sometimes. It's just small conversations, so they're not super noticeable. Did anybody else have any questions along those lines? I have one.
Had a question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So if you had a lifetime mate and you weren't true mates, but then later on in life you guys found true mates, what would happen?
So the theory...
That was my question.
Yeah. The theory is that if you have a true mate, you will never pick a different one. And the reason for that is because the true mate's call is within a person from very young. So they might not recognize it early on. Like Reth talks at one point about how Beren was it Beren and Holly? I think Holly recognized the bond before Beren did. You see it in Queen. You see that Aaron knows about it years before Elrith does. But he's so self-doubting that he basically thinks he's going to be the exception to this rule, right? So in the idea that I had was that when you are created for a person, a specific person, and that bond is like within you, nothing else is ever going to satisfy that. So when you go out, yeah, you might try to have other relationships, you might mate with other people, but in the end, until you meet that true mate, you're not going to want to be in a lifetime relationship with somebody else, because there's something within you that's driving you to find it. So Aaron, for example, in Queen of Beasts, he knows right from the get-go that she's the one for him. He knows they're true mates. But he's so terrified that she's never going to realize that, because she doesn't seem to have any sort of sexual interest at all, that he questions it just in his own mind because of his experiences with being disformed and everything else. But no, the theory is no anima who has a true mate would ever get into a lifetime relationship with somebody else for that reason, because it just wouldn't satisfy them. I'm sorry, Kathy, I had to mute you because I think you're getting an echo. I'll unmute you now, but I think we're getting an echo from your, I don't know what device you're on. Are you on
Oh,
speakerphone?
I'm not muted right now. Did you have me on mute?
I did, yeah. Because there was just, I don't know if anybody else, but for me it was coming through. It was like an echo of my voice. So I turned it off while I was talking. Sorry. It's not all the time. I'm just letting you know if you try to talk and you're muted, and it's because I did it. Sorry. I did have, oh yeah. So somebody asked me whether Elia was feeling the mate bond before the flames and smoke with breath. Or was it just that she was so overwhelmed and frightened that she was focused on him? So Elia obviously wasn't, she's human, so she was not raised to be in a mate bond, so she has zero awareness of that. What she had with Reth right from the beginning was a strong draw to him that she didn't understand and didn't know why it was happening. So the actual answer is yes, she could feel it, but she didn't know that that's what she was feeling. But it's why she comments a few times in those early chapters that she trusts him and feels comfortable with him, and she doesn't really understand why, because he is a very intimidating figure, and she knows that really she should be kind of freaking out because this guy is big and he's strong and he's scary. He's feral. But she's not. She feels very comfortable with him. And partly that's because of the relationship they had when they were children that she's unaware of, but subconsciously her instincts, if you will, respond positively to him because of that. But actually what it was she was feeling the mate bond. She just didn't know that that's what it was. Somebody asked me how old Aaron was when he first knew Elrith was his true mate. Aaron has been aware of wanting to be with Elrith since her first, what they call, breeding season, which is after she hit puberty. So the first time that they hung out after she had gone through puberty, he saw her in a new light. So she was 13 and he was 17. And it went from this is my best friend for him to I want to be with her. But he knew that she was not in that place and not ready, so he never did anything about it. And I heard somebody say, "Oh, I just want to put it out there. I grew up in a small town, and when I was 14, my boyfriend was 18, and that was not uncommon. When people are immature and also you're in a small population, it's actually really common for there to be a fairly significant age difference. And I struggle with that because I understand consent and I understand adulthood. But I also know that when I was 14 and in a relationship with an 18-year-old, you could not tell the difference in our maturity levels at all. But I also wasn't sleeping with him, so maybe that's the difference. But anyway, so Aaron was aware from when he was 17 that she was the one for him, but he also thought that she wasn't going to go there. So he did entertain other interactions with other females, but he just was never really enthralled by them. Nothing ever lasted for any length of time. So
Question.
He had quite a bit of sex, but no real relationships.
Was Aaron, did he kind of get like Reth, where Reth was like, well, I'm never going to be with Elia, and so I'm just going to have sex with all these people. Was Aaron kind of thinking the same thing, where he was just like, well, she's never going to be with me, and so I'm just going to go have sex with other people? Is that kind of the same thinking?
Sort of. So Aaron is in a very different social situation to Reth. Reth is king. He is not disformed. He's attractive. He's powerful. Like, trust me, Reth had far more opportunity and far more
Probably people approaching him.
Yes.
Okay.
So Reth had a lot more experience than Aaron did, because once Reth thought she's not going to be my mate, he stopped resisting. and started enjoying the feast of females that were willing to interact with him. But again, never fully satisfied by it, never drawn to an actual relationship. Just, anima are very, you do this because it's fun, you're going to have a good time. There's no real judgment there. So he was just mating with people when he felt like it. Aaron, it was more complicated because he's disformed, so he has fewer opportunities, and some of the opportunities that he had were not good ones, as in women or females who only wanted to mate with him because they were curious whether there was anything different about him. Um, he had a couple of experiences where females made the signals and then backed out, which is really uncommon in anima, and gave him a great deal of insecurity when that happened. But then he had a lot of experiences that were like his experience with Gwen, where it was just like, hey, we feel like doing this and it'll be fun, let's do it. And he was in this place of self-doubt and insecurity. I don't think it was so much that he thought he was going to find another mate. I think it was more trying to distract himself from the pain he was feeling because Elrith wasn't interested in him, trying to sort of fill that gap a little bit. The way I envision it anyway in his mind was that he was always on the back foot with this stuff because he was insecure. But the thing that I love about what that did for him was it made him very attentive to his partners. So because anima are very open and forward, and he was, given instructions by whoever he was with, he paid attention and he learned. Like, he was all about sort of getting good at it, I guess you could say, because he was insecure. So his response to that was, I've got to get good at this, which Elrith is now going to benefit from, because he knows what he's doing because he paid attention. Whereas Reth kind of stumbled into a lot because he just had a lot of experience. So he learned things as he went and was like, hey, cool, yeah.
Amy, I have one question about Reth and Ilya.
Mm-hmm.
So, so did Reth stop resisting, stop waiting for Ilya when he went back to human world and sort of saw her with somebody else and assumed things? Is that when he stopped waiting for her, or?
Yes. So he, spoiler alert, if anybody hasn't read through this in volume 1 yet, he went to find her because he wondered whether she was his mate, his true mate. And his response to her, if you go back and read those scenes when he talks about it, that was the first time he had the urge to make the mating call, was when he saw her when she was 16. But he was taken aback by that, and at the same time, because he was watching her secretly and saw her with another male, this is Reth's natural insecurities coming into play. He thought, oh, she's already found somebody. So he backed off. He never went and talked to her. He thought, okay, so that's the question answered. She's not my mate. Like, he just went there, which was stupid. But again, Reth is a little bit oblivious and very often just sort of, rolls off into whatever comes to mind. For whatever reason, he was like, oh, she's out of, she's out of play. I can't have her. So then when he went back, and most people didn't know that he had left. Most people didn't even know where he had gone, but his mother knew. So when he went back to Anima, at that point, he has to now sort of accommodate the idea that he doesn't have a true mate like maybe he thought he might. And so now he can just go out and try to figure out who he should be with. But he never really took it seriously, because when he'd had this conversation with his mother, who was like, this is what you're looking for, this is what you need, Elia is the one who comes to mind for him, even though when they were together they were very young. It wasn't that she came to mind for him sexually. She came to mind for him for the friendship that they had, the level of comfort that he felt with her. But of course, having then seen her as a more mature female, then he has now the added sort of sexual attraction to her. But now he thinks that he can't have her, so he's in that place of, sex to be me kind of thing. So his whole thing with going back after that was that what's the point in waiting then anymore? What's the point? Because she's not going to be with me. She's in the human world. She's not coming back here. She's with her family. She's with this guy. Like, I need to find someone else. So he started entertaining all of the opportunities that up to that point he had been resisting.
Question. Okay, so obviously, I mean, like, they met when they were children, Reth and Elia.
Mm-hmm.
And, they are able to start that friendship and everything. But if an anima didn't have a way to get through the portal and their true mate was a pure one, like, would they just have a drive to, like, just to figure out, like, why do I keep having this mate drive whenever I can't find anybody here in anima? Would they figure out a way to get to the portal? Like, would they just ask enough questions to figure out there was a portal? How would that work?
So keep in mind the last time that they knew of a true mate bond with a human was 20 generations earlier. Okay. So anima don't even have it on their radar that their mate would be human. It just wouldn't even occur to them. The only reason it occurred to Reth was because he was in the human world when he was young, and he developed this relationship with Elia. So, no, it would never cross their mind to think, I gotta get over there and see what's going on. Until, like for Gari, when Elia's like, hey, you should get over there and take a look. You'd be pretty popular. So I'll tell you from my perspective, what's going on with this is that the true mate bond is an actual decision by the creator to bring these two together and create them for each other. It is an allegory for the truth of what I actually believe. I won't get into that here. If any of you ever wants to ask me, you can ask me and I'll tell you. But just in terms of the lore of the books, the creator is real, and the creator's not going to like, haha, gotcha, you don't know where your true mate is. The creator knows that these people are going to come together. He's set them up to do that. So, no, no anima is going to like be, 25 and yearning and try to figure out where their portal is. If the creator intended for somebody to be with a human, he would make it possible for them to find them. So normally what's going on with true mate bonds is that it takes time for people to recognize them. So in the past, for example, with Baron and Holly, one of them recognized it before the other. The one who recognizes it then has to wait, which is really hard, especially if you know that this is your person and they're off mating with 15 other people over the course of 3 years, because they don't know that yet. That's hard to watch, or hard to be a part of. Yes, there's a romanticism of the true mate bond. So, in my mind, you've got people like Gwen who will connect with somebody and decide that that might be the true mate bond and they should pursue it, when it's not. So, until you've experienced it, you don't know what you're looking for, and especially when you're young, you can sort of romanticize it and try to fit what your experience is into that. I'm not saying that that's what Gwen did with Aaron, but I mean, it's that I envision that there are times, especially with the females, that they decide, oh, this is my true mate, right? They get all sort of excited about it, when actually all that's happened is that they've just developed feelings for this person because they don't know what the true mate's bond feels like because they haven't had it before. So the main conflict, I guess, you get with true mate bonds is when one person recognizes it earlier than the other. That's hard. And they have different ways of dealing with that. Some of them will confront it. Some of them will just wait. But either way, it's not easy until both people go, oh, this is what we are to each other, and then it's wonderful.
I love it. Thank you.
No problem. You got very quiet on me there. I'm going to turn you up a little bit. Oh, I had somebody ask me if Lucine had a crush on Reth before the rite, and is that why she went crazy about losing the right of survival, or was she just wanting power? If you haven't read, if you're not pretty much up to date, oh, I'm trying to remember where the Lucines are. Yeah, basically, if you haven't gotten well into Volume 2, you might want to tune out for a minute, because I'm going to give you spoilers here. What was happening with Lucine? I actually have a lot of, I have a soft spot for Lucine, because what happened for her was that she grew up basically being told, and she was special. She was very strong. She was very capable. She was primed for leadership. Her father was not in any way like, boys are the way to go. Like, her father conditioned both her and Laren for leadership. And she knew that the best way for her to have the most prominent leadership would be to be the queen. So even when she was very young, she saved herself because Reth, so she's several years younger than Reth, many years younger than Reth, and by the time she was sort of 15, 16 years old, she was aware that the king had not mated anybody, like not even just like casually had a mating relationship with anybody. And so it's a known tradition that the right of survival is a possibility, but that very much limits the audience, right? So she actually set that goal for herself. She was going to wait and see, and as long as he hadn't taken a mate, she was going to not mate with anybody, just in case. Well, then sure enough, the right of survival gets called. Don't underestimate that the wolves were involved in that, in making that happen. Because by this time, Lucine's father is on board with this, right? He wants to position his kids for leadership. If he can get Laren set up as the alpha of the wolves, and he can get Lucine set up as the queen next to Reth's king, then he's got the two second most prominent leaders in the Animus Society in his family. So Lucan is very ambitious for his kids, but genuinely loved his kids and wanted them to be successful. Like, he wasn't a jerk in the beginning. He was ambitious, though, and that drove him in directions that weren't healthy. So Lucine started as a female with goals who was attracted to the king and was willing to sacrifice to see if she could make something happen. And when the right of survival was called, she knew that she would get selected. Like, there was no question that she was going to be the one selected. She actually deserved to be selected. She was the strongest female or unmated female in the wolf tribe. So, no question about it. She earned her place to be there. It wasn't just her dad going, yeah, you get to, kid. But she had, by that time, kind of romanticized Reth. And at the same time, the infection was beginning in the wolf tribe. The things were starting to degenerate in the wolf tribe because Lucan was starting to go downhill. So now you've got a female who's already ambitious, already has kind of romanticized this guy, and who's having that fueled and fed by a father who is not in a good place. So by the time the rite of survival actually happened, Lucine had been trying, as we often do, to control what was going to happen, because the only variable in that was somebody else going to get a cheap shot in and kill her, right? She knew if she could go one-on-one with all the other females, she would kill them all. Like, she had no doubt in herself from that perspective. But when you've got something like the rite of survival, you can be in the middle of fighting one person and somebody else has just killed their person. They come at you from behind, you don't even know what's going to happen, right? So she knows that there's a chance that even though she's the strongest, she won't win. And she wants to take that she wants to control that element as much as she can. So the part of what they did was bring in a weak human. So there you've already got one that's going to be easy. And then on top of that, she approached Reth a month or two ahead of time because she wanted him pulling for her. But by this time, it's her ambition that's kind of taking over. And what her father is feeding in her by that time is, not only are you going to mate the king and become queen, and your brother's going to be the alpha when I die, but we're going to set this up in such a way that you can essentially cut the king off at the knees and you can rule the people even if the king's still alive. It was Lucan's vision, and Lucine fell into it, or got drawn to it, that if they were able to mess Reth up enough, he would become less effective, and that would give Lucine more power as queen, because she is what they would call a battle queen. She's a warrior. She was a fighter. So, and Reth is as well. So, the idea was that if Lucine could control Reth, then Lucine essentially controlled Anima. Not essentially, she would. So, and she was happy to do it that way. She got to the point where she was like, hey, if I got to do it through him, it doesn't matter as long as I'm the one pulling the strings. So by the end, she'd gotten to a place that was very selfish and ambitious and really driven by the desire for power. But in the beginning, it started really as an infatuation, and it kind of went bad over time. Well, then, of course, she got beaten in a way that nobody would anticipate. Very, very rare for the rite of survival to get to the point where the king has to make the choice. But she had, even in the way that she had set it up, had it been anyone else, had it not been Elia, had it literally been anyone else, Lucine still would have won. Reth would have chosen her because he'd already mated her when he wasn't supposed to, and he knew it. So he would have done, quote unquote, the right thing, right? And he would have chosen her and killed the other one. But because of the way it happened, there was this little loophole with incapability, and Elia refused to kill her, and da-da-da-da-da. Like, it all fell apart. And Lucine was driven crazy by that. Like, literally driven mad. Because she had done everything in her power to set this up, so there was no chance for failure. And it's still, not only did she fail, it went in, like, the worst possible direction. She would far rather have been killed than have herself set up to be shunned like that. So when you see her having taken Queen in the Rebels, oh, and just to clarify, I get in the comments a lot, people think that because Lucine and Laren are king and queen, they must be mating, even though they're brother and sister. No. They took king and queen through blood right, so they're both descended from the Alpha, and nobody else would challenge them. So they took it as brother and sister, not as mates. But anyway, so by the time she gets there, Lucine's actually starting to lose her mind a little bit. She's not the whole package anymore. Her ambition and her hate has kind of driven her over the edge. But not so far over the edge that she's completely lost her good side. If you have read Suli's story, then you know that Lucine protected her. So not everything about Lucine was bad. She just went in a bad direction. And paid the price for it, too. Does anybody else have any questions?
I have another question.
Go for it.
I was thinking about Sewell and Laren, and you were saying earlier about mates how they don't always recognize it right away.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not up to date on there, but are they like mates, or is that like a major spoiler? Can't answer that question. I don't know.
Is there anybody else here, who's not up to date with the answer to that question? Am I going to be spoiling it for anybody else if I answer this for Citrus? Rachel's typing. I just want to see what she says before I answer. Okay. I think everybody else is up to date on this, so I'll just tell you, Citrus.
Everybody here up to
Yes,
date.
they are true mates. And
Okay. Yay.
but they are not. There's some complications there. There's some difficulties there, but yes, they are.
Cool. I'm happy.
I got to tell you, Laren has been the most fun character to write for the past 3 months. Like, he's my joy right now. I decided to do with him what you're seeing happen now, back in May, and I wasn't sure I was going to be able to pull it off because it's actually a really difficult character arc to do. So yeah, I'm so stoked that everybody's getting behind this because I was really nervous about it. Oh, Rachel's just asked me in the text. Actually, somebody else asked me that too. Will Gwen find her mate? Yes, she will, eventually. But that's all I'm going to say. I got people, you guys can tell me. I got people voting for Gwen and Dargan to get together. And I'm like, really? Like, I don't see it. I mean, I'm happy to do it if that's what people want. But I was like, really? Dargan? Really? Like, he's such a, I don't know, he lacks substance. He's not a bad guy, but he lacks substance to me. But I have like several comments at different points in Queen where people are like, I say Gwen and Dargan, get them together. But I'm wondering if it's because they hate both of them because of what they did. And now they want them to like be each other's punishment. I don't know. They don't say.
Maybe Gwen and Gar.
Gwen and who?
Gwen and Gar.
Huh. That's an interesting one, actually. I hadn't thought about that. I'll have to give that some thought. I don't think so, because I think Gar needs somebody stronger than her.
Yeah.
But, I mean, she's strong, but she's kind of strong. She's not strong-willed. She's kind of just strong in knowing herself. Whereas I think Gar needs somebody who's pretty, like, not going to let him away with stuff.
Yeah,
Whereas
someone
Gwen,
like
I think, would let him away with a lot.
like his mom. Yeah, he needs someone like his mom.
Yeah, yeah. He needs somebody who will appreciate who he is and love him for who he is, but will absolutely call him on his BS. Because otherwise he's never going to grow up. He'll just be a kid for the rest of his life. I mean, I love Gar. Like, Gar is a ton of fun for me. He doesn't get to be in the book very often. I love it when he is, because he says all of the things I would be thinking and would think I shouldn't say. But he needs somebody who will be like, hey, rein it in. Like, he needs somebody who helps him pick his time and place for that stuff. Whereas I think Gwen would just kind of laugh and go, oh no. Try to pick up the pieces afterwards.
So he needs a Lila.
Yes. Well, yes. He needs He needs someone who matches him. He's a lot like Reth, even though he doesn't want to admit it. He needs somebody who's not scared of him. And he's the kind of person who scares a lot of people. So even though they like him, they're a little bit scared of him. Like, they won't cross him. And he needs a female who is not scared to cross him. And who will just tell it like it is. He doesn't need somebody... She doesn't have... I always imagined that his mate would be not as outgoing as Leela. Like, Leela's pretty putting it out there. And I think Gar would be with somebody who's a little bit quieter. But somebody who, like... they're not quiet because they're shy. They're quiet because that's just their temperament, you know. She'll, like, snap up in his face and be like, shut your mouth right now. That's what he needs. And it's coming. It's coming. He'll get his girl eventually. But I just haven't decided who it'll be yet. If you guys got to choose from the existing characters that you know, who would you want the next book to be about? Or would you want somebody who's, like, brand new? Would you rather see, like, just a completely unrelated story?
Yeah, me too.
What? You two what?
Gar.
You want to see Gar?
I vote Gar.
That's interesting. Very interesting.
I've always wanted a Gari.
Who said that? I wasn't looking, sorry.
I was saying that I would like to hear or read a Gari book.
So, where are you, Janelle, in King of Beasts?
I'm fully caught up.
So you've read volume 2?
Yeah.
You haven't read Gari's story?
Well, I have, but more. Like,
Oh, right. Sorry, I misunderstood. Tarkin. Yeah, I like him too. Renee said Tarkin.
yeah, what's up with that guy?
He is a sweetheart. Oh my gosh. If there was no Aaron, he would have got Elrith in a snap. He is a cool guy. He's also 20 years older than her. So,
No.
but I'm just saying.
That's a bit of a stretch for me.
Yeah. No, I was never
Yep.
going to write that. I'm just saying though, from his personality and the way he carries himself and stuff, if Aaron didn't exist, that's where Elrith, I can see that's where she would have been drawn. She doesn't think about it that way, but I do. Can be really
About
interesting.
11. Oh no. I hope that he survives.
Who? Laren?
Laren, yes, yeah.
Yes, I'm very interested to see how you guys feel about
Oh
the
no.
end of this month. His story has taken me in directions I never anticipated. So, see Tarkin as a Reth parallel. Yeah, Tarkin has a lot in common with Reth. He's a different type of person, but very, very similar values and integrity and strength and the whole bit. Tarkin, yeah, no, I love Tarkin. He's very cool. It's going to be a struggle to write his story, though, because he is older. And a lot of women don't want to read that. But at the same time, with him being anima, I can kind of get away with not really pointing out his age. Just be this cool captain of the guard. Nobody has to know he's 40. He's actually not 40. He's late 30s. Is there any other questions for me today?
I might have one. It's a little different, kind of off topic.
That's okay.
The roles of the anima, you were saying that they're merchants and certain tribes do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
With the war going on with the wolves, how are they army if they've never been in the fist? I thought the fist was mainly the equine.
So the wolves normally play the roles of like assassins and trackers, and they're kind of like your covert ops types. The but they are warriors. So it's not that they aren't soldiers to begin with, it's that the role that they play is different. Whereas
Sure.
the equine are more the guards and the sentries and the fighters. Um, so they aren't hard and fast on the tribes. Excuse me. But primarily the guards are made up of equines. There's a few others in there. When somebody in a tribe has a clear talent for something, they'll be allowed to do it even if it's not what their tribe does, so to speak. But it's uncommon. Most people end up falling into these roles. Um, so the wolves being fighters and trackers and spies and assassins and snipers and all of that kind of thing. They still know how to fight. In fact, they're very, very good at it. That's why Reth's so scared, because they are strategists. They're chess players. They don't just, bowl in and try to take everybody out at the knees. They think about it, and they make plans and traps and false alarms and all sorts of stuff, which is what he's been experiencing, that they keep sort of keeping everybody on their toes without actually making this full frontal assault. It's making everybody tense. They don't really know what's going on. He knows it's a strategy. You're going to see, if you're in the top tier of privilege, you're going to actually see all of this come to fruition before the end of the month. And you'll see how it all plays out. But yeah, both equines and wolves are fighters and warriors. They all do the same training, but then they have different roles that they play for the society as a whole. But in the sense of this rebellion and the conflict between them, they can do both. Both of them can do both, and so they are.
So do they train together?
In my mind, yes and no. So there's a lot of education and training that happens for the young anima that I haven't really shown. They make reference to it sometimes. So when they were younger, before they were sort of choosing a career, so to speak, yes, they all educated together and trained together. And at times, even when they were doing things within their specific tribes, these two tribes would come together and do stuff together because their roles are similar. So it's kind of a mix, is the truth. There's some that they do just within their tribe, and then there's some they do as the wider thing. But like Baron as a captain has embraced basically anybody who wants to train can when they're young, when they're really young. The early education and the early physical training that they would do with the equines that are sort of destined to be guards would be offered to anybody who wanted to do it. Anima young are encouraged to sort of explore and find their place, what they want to do, what they're good at, and educate in that area. So Baron has trained young people, or had in his training young people from all the different tribes. But as they get older, as they get into their late teens and they start deciding, okay, this is what I'm going to do, then they become more, it's more of a silo. So the wolves would train, because the wolves are strategists and assassins and spies and stuff like that. They would train their young to do those things. Once they hit sort of mid-late teens, they'll be training primarily with their own tribe. Same with the equines. But there's a crossover. Baron is a strategist as well, and Reth has other spies that are not wolves, but the wolves are just particularly good at it, so they get used. And Reth has spies that are wolves, so this whole thing has been very interesting, because he's not been able to access all of the resources he would normally have, or not know if he can trust all the resources that he has. Um, Renee says she loves the older man aspect. I do too, but that's because I have a husband who's older. I was a gar in my own way. I was somebody who needed somebody who would call me on my BS. And when I was growing up, the guys that were my age either just gave in and were like, yeah, whatever you want, because I was too strong-willed, or they weren't interested because I was intimidating. So I've always liked older men. And I've always needed somebody who was sort of ahead of me on the curve so they could see where I was going and be like, that's not going to be a good idea. But not everybody likes that in terms of a romance. So I'll have to see what to do with Tarkin because he is old enough that he's getting to the edge of what people will accept in romance. I also love Borscht. Citrus said, if any of you have read Prince, both Borscht and Philippe, they both light my fire. I think they're both awesome. And they're both older, but Borscht especially. Borscht is like 40-something. I can see Tarkin. Someone was asking about Tarkin, something about him being the one in training. He was the one that showed the skill Reth was looking for to protect Elia. Yes. So when you saw him there, he was still very young. He was like 19, I think, 18 or 19. And he had just been chosen to train as a guard. And he was more skilled than the others. Reth recognized in him that he had a little bit more discipline and a little bit more natural talent. And so Reth picked him out to be one of the young guys that they were bringing in to add to Elia's personal guard because Reth trusted his way of handling himself. He thought he was going to be a man of integrity, and he is. So imagine then 20 years down the line, this is who that guy has become. He's a guy who has been in a trusted role, close to the royal family, close to the captain of the guard this whole time. So he's got the best of the best in terms of training and access and resources and stuff like that. But he's a good man. Younger men are too immature. Yes. I never saw that. Renee said, I love the Confidence is Sexy commercial with a 200-year-old man. I don't know. I've never seen that, but that sounds awesome. I love that stuff. I do think confidence is sexy. I also think that a lot of young men, what they have is not confidence but arrogance, which is a little bit different. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But that was what Reth was like when he was like in his late teens and early 20s. He was cocky, and he learned. By the time you see him at the beginning of King of Beasts, he's about to turn 30. And he's learned, he's been humbled a few times, so he's learned the value of not just assuming all of the time that he is the best answer to everything. But when he was younger, he was very, especially early on, the first couple years of his rule, he got a little bit full of himself. If you read Queen, there's a point where I think it's Lern talks to Elrith and says, hey, don't let your father basically, don't believe that your dad has always been who he is now, because he wasn't.
I'm here, but I have no clue what I'm doing.
Oh, hello, sweetie. I'm just going to turn you down a little bit. We are just shooting the breeze now. So if you have any questions, jump in, because I'm going to have to get off of here pretty soon. But we're just shooting the breeze about King of Beasts at the moment. Sravanthi said, I went from hating Laren to hoping that he could redeem himself. And that makes my heart sing, because that was what I wanted to do with him. I wanted to take him from somebody that you hated to somebody that you were rooting for.
Well, it worked.
I'm so glad, because I genuinely... I wish Cardaloon was still here, because she was having those conversations with me back in May where I was like, I really want to do this and I don't know if I can. And she was like, good luck, because she hated him. She hated him. She's like, I look forward to seeing if you can do that. But I've loved Laren from the beginning, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I didn't want to like him at all.
I loved it. I loved it. There was this phase. Okay, so some people right after Laren's scenes where he was remembering Lucine as a young his little sister, and he was expressing his grief in the narration but not showing it to the wolves. There were a few people that right away were like, "Wait, wait, wait. Don't make me like this guy. I hate this guy." But for most people, they just couldn't stand him at that point.
I was one of those.
Yeah,
But there
I
was
was
this
too.
point, there was this
I was
point, and I'm
so
trying to
mad at
remember
him.
where it was. I think it was when he started standing up for the females in the camp. I can't remember. There was this like transition time of like a week where I started getting all of these comments where people were like, "What are you doing? I don't want to like him. Why am I starting to like him? Why is he doing this to me?" And I was just like, yes, I was totally doing the author fist pump like that week. So I was like, it's working.
I was so mad at him when they were at the river, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
like I just started overthinking it. And I'm like, no, this can't possibly. He's gonna give in because this wouldn't even be an option if he wasn't going there.
Well, I
Like he
did.
has to become a good person at some point, or else Reth wouldn't have given him the option and thought of him as a good person.
I did originally because he starts off and he's really small character at the time, but in volume 1 where he shows up at the beginning is in the elders and security council meetings, and he is a balance to his father who's super emotional. And initially my plan for him when I first had him show up that way was that he would be this quote unquote good guy, or the guy who was like the thoughtful wolf, and he would go bad out of grief over what happened to his family. He would like go bad, and I was going to have him be a full-on villain and the kind you love to hate, another Lucine basically to take Lucine's place when she was gone. But it
I
was
was
like
so happy that
right
you took it the way
after.
you did.
It was right after I was plotting volume 2, so it was right after um, Lucine. Well, it was when I knew Lucine. I hadn't written it yet, but I knew Lucine was going to die. And like I say, I had in my mind that Laren was going to step in to become the villain that she had ceased to be. And I was literally cooking dinner, and I had Cardaloon read a few scenes for me. It was the opening for Gari and Laren in the beginning of volume 2. I think I'd done the first 2 scenes or something. And I was cooking dinner, and I was picturing Laren because I realized I hadn't done a great job of the setting and letting the reader see him. And I thought I need to make them see him. And then when I saw him, he was like super hot. And I was like, oh wow, what a waste, this villain, he's super hot. And then I was like, man, because I love anti-heroes and I love villains who get redeemed. I love when you take someone who actually is bad and you get to the point where you like them. I love that when other authors do it, and I've never done it. And I had just finished writing CEO, which has, a horrible villain. And I love writing villains, like the really bad guys. It's very cathartic to have somebody who just does horrible things and you can make them do or say whatever you want because you don't have to make them likable. But I had already done that. I already had a really bad villain. And so then I was like, well, Laren could be, kind of like the anti-hero where he is a bad guy, but he's got aspects of him that are sympathetic, so you can like, because everyone hated Lucine so much, and I knew things about her that weren't in the book that made me have a much softer heart towards her. And so initially I was like, I could do that with Laren, where he's a villain, but you get to see that side of him that, if you were on the wolf side, you wouldn't think he was the villain. You'd think he was a good guy. And then I went, oh, wait.
Much that you did that, especially with Lucine, because you start to realize that she was a person too.
I hope so. I don't think I gave her enough page time, to be quite honest with you, because I could have done
I
a lot
still
more
thought
with
it.
her. I
I
wanted you to
almost
see
had
that she
this
had
flaw where
feelings. What was that?
Yeah, I always have this flaw where I like, even if someone's like the worst person on earth, I still think back to they were someone's baby at some point. There's
Yeah.
something that drove them there, and it feels really nice to see a villain and you get to unfold all of that. So it's
Yeah.
not just they're a horrible person at all. And even with Lucine, I caught little bits with her too, where she was a person who had her own thoughts and emotions too.
Yeah.
She wasn't just all bad. There was just a little bit there to let you know that yeah, she was a person too.
Well, I think that characters in general are a lot more interesting when they are full bodied. And by that I mean good people do bad things and bad people do good things. And, you know, being able to see that Reth sometimes doesn't do the right thing or sometimes makes the wrong choice or unleashes his anger
Yeah.
when he shouldn't makes him a much more interesting man than somebody who's just perfect all the time. And with villains, I find villains. I don't like to read villains that are not that don't have something about them that is likable. So by that I mean they can be super intelligent, super talented, funny. You know, something. They need something in them that makes you want to be around them, even though they're horrible. And like I say, with a villain, you can go either direction. You can have them be awful, but just fun to read anyway. Or in this case, I decided with Laren, let's think about if you're in the wolves' shoes, the good wolves, and you really think that you guys have been, you know, treated wrongly. You really think that you've been sort of stifled by this Leonin tribe. Like you really think that they've done the dirty on you. You don't see Laren as a villain, you see him as a hero. And then on top of that, what if he actually is a hero? What if he's the guy who, in the right place, would have been the lead of the story? And I was like, oh. It was a challenge, and I decided to take it. And I'm really glad now that I did because it worked. If it hadn't have worked, I would be sitting here apologizing to you all.
Loved that you started with the 4 different characters' perspectives and it like that just added so much to the book and to the whole world.
I was so scared of doing that because I knew how much. Sorry, Kathy, I had you muted because there was sound coming through your thing, and I forgot to unmute you. I'm very sorry, but we can hear you now if you speak. But I'm just
kept talking. I'm like, does someone hear me?
I'm so sorry. When I was going into Volume 2, the reason Cardalune and I were talking back in April and May was because everybody loves Reth and Elia so much, and I knew I was going to be splitting them up, and I had just written a story where the second volume had the 2 main characters split up, and the whole time the readers were like, get them back together, get them back together, get them back together. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that again. But I knew they had to be apart, so I thought, well, maybe if I can bring, that was how the dream thing came, maybe if I can bring them together sometimes so they're not always apart. But I just knew it was going to be a hard slog if there wasn't some romance in that volume. And I wanted to get into Gari's story. And then when I decided to redeem Laren, he was just fascinating to me. I just love writing him so much, but I was terrified. When I first started writing Volume 2, I originally had it structured where you got a chapter from each point of view character's eyes in a row, and it was so choppy and so like I was like, no, they're gonna fall, like they're not gonna be able to read this. It's gonna just they're gonna get confused. So then I started going to like 6 to 8 chapters per storyline. So Reth and Laren versus Gari and Elia. But yeah, it was seriously nerve wracking. Like I'm not joking. I was freaking out when Volume 2 first started about whether people were gonna stick with it or drop the book. Because I thought, are they just gonna go, I'm not interested in these people. I'll wait till Reth and Elia are back together.
Oh, well, I love it.
I'm really glad that you do.
You had said something like, I hope you guys don't hate it or something like that. And So I was nervous at first, and then I'm like, what is she talking about? This is wonderful.
I was
It
really
rounds it all
nervous.
out.
Really nervous.
Yes. And then the Laren, I'm so happy about Laren. I didn't like him for quite a while because I thought you were going to redeem Lucine when there was that scene where she kind of was compassionate towards Gari.
Hmm.
And so I got all hopeful about that. And then she didn't redeem herself. So with Laren, I'm like, I can't like this guy because it's not going to work out.
I was toying with redeeming Lucine. There was somebody actually said it in the comments one time, Gari and Lucine, and I thought, how did you know you're in my head? I played with that idea, but I
Oh,
didn't
that was
like it.
me. The compassion,
Yeah, because
is that what you're talking about?
I had
Uh-huh.
originally plotted a section where she became one of the outsiders, and her and Elia actually become friends. Like that was one of the directions that I played with going, was letting
See, that's what I
Lucine's
thought was
soft
going to
side.
happen. That's what I thought was going to happen with that compassion that she showed, that exchange. And I was like, oh, she's changing. She's starting to realize things. And yeah, then it didn't happen. So I was all bummed out.
Well, I'm glad that you guys enjoyed. Like seriously, I was freaking out at the beginning of volume 2. I was like, they're either gonna love it or they're gonna hate it, and this is a real risk. And I'm very, very grateful that everybody's stuck with it. We just lost Jean, so I'm just letting her know it's not a problem. I'm gonna have to get out of here in a couple minutes. Did anybody have any questions they didn't have a chance to ask?
Yeah, I'm curious. Did Lucan challenge Reth at one point at the beginning of the book when Reth was talking to Lucan? He kind of, I mean, he made some comments, something about challenging him, or there was just a lot of animosity there.
Yeah, so what was happening at the beginning, Reth was aware that the wolves were, he, so he and Lucan had known each other for a long time. Lucan is more of Reth's father's peer. There's a little few years difference. So Lucan is younger, a little bit younger than Reth's father, but has been in leadership for a long time. So Reth grew up with Lucan being part of the Security Council and the elders and so forth. So he's known him for a long time. And Laren and Lucine are younger than Reth, but not so much younger that they're completely out of his sphere. So he's known them all for a long time. Lucan was originally with Reth's dad, um, uh, fairly supportive and, you know, a positive member of society. But Reth had seen in recent years Lucan becoming more ambitious for the wolves, wanting to raise the wolves' profile in Anima, and he suspected, correctly, that what Lucan really wanted to do was get the wolves into royal position. So when you see him at the Rite of Survival and he's making some comments to Lucan and basically pressing him to either challenge or shut up, it's because he's been sensing more and more that Lucan is on the cusp, on the edge of challenging him. He knows he can beat Lucan, but he also knows Lucan's really strong and has a lot of support within his tribe. So he doesn't want to taunt him into it, but he was letting him know, if you want to do this, we'll do this. Like he was making no bones about it because Lucan was getting really aggressive. And the reason Lucan was getting aggressive was because nothing was working out the way it was supposed to. Lucan went into the Rite of Survival thinking he was coming out with his daughter as queen. And when Elia got chosen, Lucan wanted to argue about it because he wanted to argue for Lucine. He wanted Lucine to be picked instead. So, and Reth sensed that. And also suspected that Lucan knew what had gone on between him and Lucine, and that this whole thing was a strategy. He knew that whoever had brought Elia had to have known that she had a relationship with Reth. As soon as he saw her there, once he got past the shock of it, he knew. He says very early on, he says it can't be coincidence. He knows that there's no way they picked her just by chance. So, and he suspected right off the bat because the wolves were the ones who had the selection of the human. He knew, but the question was whether Lucan knew or whether he'd sent some, emissaries, so to speak.
Sorry, I have a quick random question.
Go for it.
Let's see. How do I word it? Okay, so, um, how would they choose a strong, pure one?
Normally, what they would do is they would send a team across the Traverse. This is what has happened in many generations past, because it hasn't happened recently. But what they do is they send initially like a scouting team that go out, and what they're looking for is a female who's an orphan, who's a virgin, who is very physically strong and mentally very strong and capable. So in my mind, you're looking for somebody who's like an athlete, or who does something physical, who's, and this is hard to find. They've got a lot of resources through the Guardians that you don't really get to see because we're not in that aspect of it. But the Guardians have access to a lot of information and a lot of systems. So the Guardians would normally help them identify where to look for somebody like this. So they'd send a scouting team out. The scouting team would go out, identify a few different females that they think would work, and they would normally be looking at colleges and places like that, and they would be looking at things like athletes or extremely smart people. And then they take those reports back to the leader of the tribe, and they say, okay, here's our options, basically. And then they would send somebody over to take one of them. And the Guardians help them kind of clean up the mess when they're done. But what they did with Elia was they picked her for a different reason. They weren't really looking for anybody else. They knew that there had to be some way. What they went over looking for was a way to weaken Reth. And she was the answer. So they didn't know about her going into it. They went looking for her, and they found her.
So how do they know the person is a virgin?
I've toyed with that in my
smell
mind.
it?
I have imagined that there's an element to the scent, but also, in colleges and stuff, people talk about this stuff a lot, and I always imagined that they just kind of were able to tap into. Yes, I think because I haven't gotten into it in detail, I think the final, what do you call it? The litmus test would be the scent. There would be something to the scent of the female, or they would be able to tell if there was the scent of males on her. But yeah, really, I just kind of took author license there and went, well, they heard gossip. They figured it out. In the past, keep in mind, in the past, like you're talking 100, 200 years ago, they would have been picking younger women. There would have been, it wouldn't have, 200, 300, 400 years earlier, women who were 15, 16 years old were seen as adults. They wouldn't have had any qualms about taking. Plus, society happened in such a way back then, too, where it was far more likely for a woman to be a virgin. Back then as well. So that's become more challenging for them in this day and age than it used to be. And they don't do it very often.
One more question. Are there multiple portals from the animal world? And if there are there multiple guardians?
Ooh. You're gonna make me answer. Do I answer this one?
Don't answer it.
No, okay, I'll say this. There is more than one portal. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
Oh, I have a question that I was thinking of. So if a disformed anima can have an anima that is not disformed, does that mean that Gary could have a anima child that is able to shift?
Yes, it's less common, partially because disformed often end up mating disformed, so that makes them a much higher likelihood of having offspring that are also disformed. For Gary, his mate is human, which means he could also have a human baby. But yes, in theory, yep, He could have an offspring that can shift. Will we know why Elia was selected by the wolves? Yes, you will. The whole thing, that whole story is about to come out in September. You will see all of the answers about exactly what happened, how they found her and why. But I will tell you that Reth's theory on it, that he's expressed a couple different times in the book, is on the wider scale is true. The reason ultimately the reason she was selected was because they believed that they could weaken Reth by bringing her into the right and killing her. So I'm going to have to get going. The only question that I have left in my... Oh, does going through the portal cause the insanity that Lucan suffered? It can. It doesn't have to. Again, you're going to get some more answers on that really early in September if you're in the top tier of privilege, and in the first half of September if you're not. The only other question that I had been sent was about the Dangerous book, the CEO book. I don't know if any of you guys have read that, so sorry if this is going to be boring for you. But I was asked, did Chris want to take Leela away from Dane? What was his motive in getting her out and leaving Dane there? And ultimately, why did he pull a gun on her? So, because I think there's a lot of people that haven't read this book, I'll be a little bit careful. But the way your question ended was, if it all boils down to jealousy, I'm a bit confused. It doesn't all boil down to jealousy, but that is how Chris rationalizes it. So Chris had, or has, real feelings for Leela. When he had the opportunity to play the boyfriend role, so to speak, as in be the protector, be the guide, be the support, he was enjoying that. So a lot of what he did was about enjoying that. But in terms of the ending and how it all came together, a lot of it, so I don't know about you guys, but something that I've observed about humanity is that we can have things that start in one place and take us somewhere else. So when Chris was a kid, he looked up to his brother. His brother seemed to be the golden child, seemed to be the one who did all the right things, and had all the approval. So there was that sibling rivalry. As they grew a little bit older, getting into teens and early 20s, now the brother is the kind of the martyr, and there's no way to compete with that, right? So the brother is always the one that everybody's pursuing. What it's actually about for Chris, he doesn't really consciously know this, but what it's actually about for him, he wants to be the special one. He wants to be the one that people are pursuing. He wants to be the one that everybody singles out and says, that's an amazing guy. And he feels like he gets sort of cast in a shadow by his brother. And that creates a lot of resentment and a lot of anger and a chip on his shoulder. He's got something to prove. You don't make great decisions when you're in that place because everything kind of goes through that filter. So a lot of what Chris is doing towards the end of the book is kind of fulfilling for him efforts to make himself stand out. So it's not just about his brother, because the driver is actually about how he feels about himself and how he wants other people to feel about him. But his brother is the target of his attention because his brother is the catalyst, or the kind of the example that he has throughout his life of being overlooked or being undervalued. He's always felt like when he's next to Dane, he's always second best. Always. He's felt that way from day one. And the truth is, he kind of has been, because Dane is stronger than him, and Dane is smarter than him, and Dane, achieved a lot, and so he has always, what he needed to do if he wanted to deal with it in a healthy way was go find his own thing and do his own thing and become his own man and become special in his own right. But instead he he was always trying to be in Dane's shoes. And so that's why it ended up being such a personal thing between them. Okay, I'm going to have to get going. I'm sorry. But it's been lovely, once again, speaking to you all.
Yes, it's been fun.
I have written down here, and now I need to look at it really fast. Our next one is going to be the 12th of September. And before then, I will do the draw for the paperbacks. So if any of you guys are in top tier privilege, there's two ways that you might get a paperback at the end of August, early September. The first is if you're in top tier privilege, I'm doing one drawing for each book. So if you're in top tier privilege for either King or Queen, you need to let me know so I can make sure your name's on the list. At the end of the month, I'm going to make sure I've got everybody. I'm less concerned about you guys who are here in Discord and more concerned about the readers that aren't in here. But so if you forget, it's not a big deal. If you think about it, ping me or send me a DM or whatever and be like, I've got top tier in these books or this book, so I can make sure you're on the list. So there's one drawing there. The other side is that if Queen hits 10,000 chapter unlocks in privilege this month, I'll do another drawing for Queen. If Beast hits 20,000 this month, I'll do a drawing for it. Both of them are projecting a little bit short. So at this point those might not happen, but I'll hold those goals for next month as well. So if they don't happen this month, they probably will happen next month. And I'm also going to try, depending how this month goes, try to get some other little extras that I will also do drawings for, so it's not just one prize and we're done. I'm going to try and have several things. I was going to do that in a live chat, but I've realized because I want to prove to everybody that I've got all the names, I don't want anybody, especially the readers that don't come on Discord, I don't want them feeling like, oh, I took their names and their privilege, I didn't actually do anything about it. I'm going to actually do a video where I show all of the names going into the hat so that they know that they were in there. And that's going to take a long time and be super boring. So I'm not going to do it live, but I am going to video it. And I might do a chat with you guys for the drawings for the extra prizes, because I might find ways to incorporate not just the privilege people for that. I'm not sure. So basically watch this space, but just know that you're not going to get forgotten, and I will make sure and check in with everybody at the end of the month to make sure you're on the list if you do have privilege. And if there are giveaways that are going to go outside of the privilege group, I'll make sure everybody knows, and I'll try to make it something you don't have to be here live to win. You just have to enter. So if you have requests, some of the ideas that I've put forward, that people have put forward to me, some of people are saying they would love to have an image of the book cover with me signing my name on it. Some people have said they would like to have maybe a scene that's written with the characters that's not in the book, like a little extra that's not posted anywhere else. I can't remember. Does anybody else remember? There was 2 or 3 other ideas that we brought up in that discussion. Anyway, if there's a type of prize that you guys would be motivated by, that you think would be fun to have, you know, if we do like a monthly draw, let me know. I'm going to work on getting some of these other types of material together so that I have them and we can just have fun with them at different times. So if you have ideas, feel free to DM me or ping me in the chat. Let me know. And if you are in the top tier of privilege and you are not in the paperback VIP chat room, let me know, because you're supposed to be in there. But don't worry if you're not in that room or you're not in that tier. Basically, all you're missing is me talking about random things to try and keep these guys entertained for a month until we do the drawing at the end of the month. So it's, yeah, I don't want to make anybody feel bad. An inspirational quote from the book written out fancy. I'll try. I don't know if there are inspirational quotes. You might have to tell me what you would consider to be inspirational quotes from the book. I could do a drawing and say, hey, you can pick a quote from the book and I'll write it for you. I have nice handwriting. Something like that. Anyway, so if you guys have any ideas for prizes that you think would be fun, let me know. We'll get together again September 12th, I believe it will be. And until then, I just want to thank you guys because you're making my dreams come true. And I still can't quite believe that I get to do this. So, thank you. I love you all. And I'll
Oh,
talk to
thank
you
you.
all
We love
soon.
you too.
No, I'm
Thank you for
talking
doing
serious.
this. Love you.
I'll
Have a
talk
great
to you
day.
soon. You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
This was so fun. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.